Tonight, the economic future of the country hangs in the balance. The stakes could not be higher, as decisions made in the coming days will impact every corner of American life. A massive legal battle is heading to the Supreme Court, and it could change everything for American families and businesses. The eyes of the nation are fixed on the justices, whose ruling will set a precedent for years to come. The fight is over the sweeping tariffs put in place by former President Donald Trump, tariffs that have sparked years of fierce debate. Supporters say they protect American jobs, while critics argue they hurt consumers and global trade. The core question: did the president have the legal power to impose these taxes on imported goods alone? The answer will ripple from Washington to your wallet, affecting prices on everything from groceries to electronics. Business groups nationwide have joined forces in a lawsuit, arguing the tariffs are an illegal overreach, crippling operations and raising costs for consumers. They claim the economic burden is being felt in every state from coast to coast. Projections show that if these tariffs remain, the average American household could face an extra cost of up to $2,800 per year by 2025. For many families, that's the difference between saving for college or struggling to pay monthly bills. For small business owners, this is a fight for survival. They warn they can't absorb rising costs much longer. Many fear layoffs, closures, and lost dreams if relief doesn't come soon. The Supreme Court's decision will be a turning point for the American economy, with the world watching. Investors, workers, and leaders across the globe are bracing for the outcome. The tariffs have strained global relationships and disrupted supply chains. International partners are watching closely, as the verdict could reshape alliances and trade agreements. Upholding the tariffs could cement a protectionist U.S. stance. Striking them down could signal a return to open trade. The decision will echo through boardrooms and government halls worldwide. This is about the balance of power, the health of our economy, and the principles that govern our nation. The outcome will test the limits of presidential authority and congressional oversight. The outcome will shape not just policy, but the daily lives of millions. From the price of everyday goods to the security of American jobs, the impact will be felt far and wide. And this story is far from over. As the nation waits, one thing is certain: the decision will leave a lasting mark on America's future. To truly understand this legal battle, we need to look back in time and trace the origins of these controversial tariffs. It all began with a shift in U.S. trade policy that would have ripple effects across the globe. During his presidency, Donald Trump made trade a central pillar of his America First agenda. He argued that decades of unfair trade deals had led to massive trade deficits, shuttered factories, and millions of lost American jobs. To fight back, he turned to one of the president's most powerful economic tools: tariffs, which are essentially taxes on imported goods. Trump bypassed Congress, relying on the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This law gives the president broad authority to act during a national emergency, even in matters of international trade. He declared threats like the fentanyl crisis and persistent trade deficits as national emergencies, then imposed sweeping tariffs by executive order, without waiting for congressional approval. Supporters called it a bold and necessary move to protect American industries, revive manufacturing, and bring back jobs that had been lost overseas. They believed tariffs would make U.S. goods more competitive, encourage consumers to buy American, and force other countries to negotiate fairer trade deals. But critics warned that tariffs would backfire, hurting American consumers and businesses by raising prices on everyday goods and making U.S. companies less competitive abroad. Economists pointed out that these extra costs are usually passed down the supply chain, ultimately landing on the shoulders of ordinary Americans. Business owners who rely on imported materials argued the policy would damage their global competitiveness and threaten their survival in a tough market. This fundamental disagreement over both the wisdom and legality of the tariffs set the stage for today's Supreme Court showdown, a battle that could reshape the limits of presidential power. The debate over their impact continues to this day, dividing politicians, business leaders, and everyday Americans alike. As the Supreme Court weighs in, the stakes have only grown, with the outcome poised to affect the future of American trade, jobs, and the balance of power in Washington. The tariffs at the heart of this lawsuit fall into two main categories, each with its own distinct justification and far-reaching implications for U.S. policy. The first category targets countries linked to fentanyl trafficking, a direct response to the devastating opioid crisis that has swept across the United States, claiming thousands of lives each year. In response, the Trump administration declared the opioid epidemic a national emergency, using tariffs as a tool to pressure foreign governments to crack down on the illegal drug trade and stem the flow of fentanyl into the country. This marked a novel and controversial use of trade policy, effectively turning tariffs into a weapon in the ongoing war on drugs, an approach that had rarely, if ever, been tried before. The legality of invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, for this purpose, is a central issue in the case, raising questions about the limits of presidential authority. The second broader category involves tariffs aimed at reducing the U.S. trade deficit, a persistent economic challenge for decades. President Trump argued that ongoing trade imbalances, especially with China, threatened America's economic security, and justified sweeping tariffs on a wide range of imported goods. The goal was to make imports more expensive, encourage domestic production, protect American jobs, and ultimately rebalance global trade relationships. These tariffs affected billions of dollars in trade, impacting industries from steel and aluminum to consumer electronics and beyond. However, business groups and many economists argue that trade deficits are a normal feature of a globalized economy, not the kind of emergency IEEPA was originally meant to address. This distinction between a true emergency and a long-term economic issue is central to their legal challenge and could set a precedent for future administrations. The case will ultimately decide how far a president can stretch emergency powers when it comes to trade and economic policy. The outcome could reshape the boundaries of U.S. trade policy and presidential authority for years to come, with lasting effects on both the economy and the law. The Business Coalition's lawsuit makes a direct argument: the president exceeded his authority under IEEPA. They point out the law doesn't mention tariffs, and that the power to tax belongs to Congress. By imposing tariffs via executive order, they say, the president usurped a core legislative power. They also challenge whether a trade deficit qualifies as a true national emergency. In their view, IEEPA was meant for crises like foreign attacks, not long-term economic trends. The lawsuit isn't just about these tariffs, it's about setting limits on presidential power for the future. The businesses want the Supreme Court to draw a clear line between executive and congressional authority. They argue that tariffs have forced companies to raise prices, lay off workers, or shut down, costs passed on to consumers. This is not just an abstract legal debate, but one with real financial consequences for American families. The Supreme Court's ruling will set a precedent for generations. The government has mounted a robust defense, arguing the tariffs are legal under IEEPA. While the law doesn't mention tariffs, they say it gives the president broad power to regulate economic transactions during emergencies, including imports. The government insists IEEPA was designed for flexibility, giving the president tools to respond quickly to foreign threats. Limiting these powers, they argue, would weaken the executive's ability to protect national interests. They maintain that declaring a national emergency is largely up to the president, and courts should defer to that judgment. Ultimately, the government sees tariffs as a valid tool for foreign policy and national security. The Supreme Court must now decide how far presidential power can go. As the case moved through the courts, judges have been deeply divided. Some federal courts sided with businesses, blocking the tariffs and agreeing the president likely exceeded his authority. These rulings gave challengers momentum and temporary relief. Other courts deferred to the executive branch, ruling in favor of the government and upholding the tariffs. This patchwork of decisions created legal chaos, some businesses protected, others not. The resulting circuit split is a classic reason for Supreme Court intervention. The highest court often steps in to resolve such divisions and ensure federal law is applied uniformly. The current uncertainty makes a final decision urgent. The Supreme Court's ruling will bring clarity to businesses and the economy. With lower courts split, the fate of the tariffs now rests with the Supreme Court. The justices must first decide whether to hear the case, a step most experts expect given the stakes. If accepted, both sides will submit arguments and present their cases in person. The justices' questions during oral arguments will offer clues to their thinking. A final decision is expected by summer 2025, reflecting the urgency of the issue. The ruling will set a binding precedent. Does IEEPA give the president authority to impose tariffs? The outcome will shape not just these tariffs, but the scope of presidential economic power for years. The nation and the world will be watching. The Supreme Court's decision will trigger a major economic domino effect no matter the outcome. If the tariffs are upheld, businesses will face continued financial pressure, likely passing higher costs to consumers. Prices on everything from electronics to groceries could rise, costing families thousands each year. Some companies may lay off workers or shut down entirely. If the tariffs are struck down, businesses would see immediate relief, potentially lowering prices and easing inflation. However, domestic industries protected by tariffs could face renewed foreign competition. The decision will also impact U.S. trade policy and international relations. The court's ruling will reshape the economic landscape for years to come. This case is about more than tariffs. It's about the future of presidential power and your wallet. If the court sides with the government, it affirms broad executive authority to use economic tools like tariffs in a crisis. If it sides with businesses, it reasserts Congress's power over taxation and trade, limiting unilateral presidential action. The outcome will affect prices, jobs, and the balance of power in Washington. This is a vivid reminder that constitutional law shapes everyday life. The Supreme Court's answer will resonate for decades, shaping our economy and our democracy. Every American has a stake in this decision. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.